Hi guys, Wade Beckersey, Money Shorts. It's the second episode of the Credit and Collections podcast. Today we have the pleasure of talking with Neil Ricketts. We're going to be talking everything from credit management, the AICM and cricket in general. All right, Neil. So, I think I was remembering before we got here today that we met many years ago at an AICM conference. So maybe tell us a little bit about the AICM.
That would be.
Is that correct?
Yeah, that would be right. Yeah, that was.
I don't remember the
in the
specific.
Gold Coast, I think it might have been. You'd not long joined.
Oh yes, that's right.
Yes,
so let's
and
let our audience know a bit about the AICM.
Yeah, look, I got involved with the AICM a long time ago. I think next year it'd be my 35th.
35th year.
Year as a member. And it was at the time I joined. It was after I'd done some training courses with the AICM.
Just for our audience, the AICM, what does that stand for?
Australian Institute of Credit Management.
Okay.
Yeah. I was working for John Martins at the time. They impressed upon us that the importance of getting some qualifications and some training in debt collection, legal entities, and that sort of stuff. And from there, I joined, and I'd been a member for about 5 or 6 years. Attended quite a few of their functions, their seminars, dinners, etc.
So it's a community for everyone that's in the credit management?
That's correct, yeah. Now, back in the day, there was probably a lot more credit people in South Australia. So, for example, their one-day seminars were held back in those days down at McLaren Vale.
Okay.
They'd get 150, 180 people there.
Okay, all in the credit industry?
Yeah, all within the credit industry. Majority, over 50% would have been credit operatives.
Okay. So that would be fun times?
Sorry?
That would have been fun times with that many people?
They were, they were. And certainly it was then in the early 90s that I got approached to join council.
AICM has a council?
Which I did, yes. So they have a local divisional council. So the structure is each state has a division council, and then there's a national board.
Okay.
That is representative by a director from each state.
Yeah. That
is elected from each local council. Head office is in Sydney.
They've got a CEO as well?
Yeah, CEO, right? Yeah. So, yes, in my time they've had 3 CEOs, so it's been good there's been a lot of stability there. And,
so you've even been a president of the division, is that right?
So after a few years on council, helping with different things like whether it be membership, events, functions. I took on the role as vice president.
Vice president nationally or
locally?
Yeah, okay.
Locally on the SA Division Council. And then after a couple of years in that position, Hilary Orr, who was our division president at the time, was setting up a practice of her own.
Okay.
She's a liquidator, official receiver, and she found that it was too much for her to be doing the role as division president, plus trying to set up a new business, plus she had a young family at the time. So she stepped down and asked me if I'd be prepared to nominate, which I did, and took on the role, and held that for 3 years. The bylaws and articles have changed a little bit over the years, but back in those days, 3 years was the maximum term. So I stepped down. And then after
what
that,
years are we sort of talking here, Neil? Can you sort of fill us in? Maybe
really,
we want to.
you know, if I do that, I might put a bit of an
That'll
age.
show how young you are. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's right. I was president in SA from '99 to 2002,
Okay.
and then I remained on council and was elected to the position of national director for SA in March 2004.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, very good. And so I suppose you've got lots of friends in the industry through that, and collegues that you still keep in touch.
And that's absolutely.
It's good for networking.
And that's been the thing. To my mind, the biggest thing is the networks you form, the friends, lifelong friends, who may or may not even be involved in these days, but
they still
you're still still in touch with them. But as far as the networking is concerned, it's just been fantastic because I've got to know most of the high-profile liquidators around town.
Gives you a bit of
receiver managers, administrators, as such. So it's not often that there's an insolvency matter, appointments made that I don't know who the administrator is or whatever the particular matter is. So and that's helped because you can just pick up the phone, talk to them if you've got a query, and find out a bit more information that may not be forthcoming in the the official notifications and the like. Plus other credit professionals, if you've got a query or,
something as similar to what you're going through or dealing with currently in your business. Yeah.
So whether it be at a function or just pick up the phone and have a chat about a particular issue you might be having.
So I suppose that's for anyone that's listening that is thinking about becoming a member of the AICM. That's a great opportunity for them, especially the up-and-coming credit professional or somebody that's in that space.
Yeah, and one of the things I guess over my time of involvement is 20 years ago they introduced the Young Credit Professional of the Year Award. I've had staff who've worked for me who I've been able to nominate for that and have done well out of the award.
Fantastic.
Had a couple of state winners and a national winner who work for me, and it's just fantastic to see the younger ones progress within their careers in credit to bigger and better things.
Yeah, fantastic. So I just got back from the national conference, so that's held around Australia, which gets everyone that's a member, some non-members as well. There's about 400 of us in Melbourne. That's a great conference to go to.
Yes.
You always pick up some insights or something that you haven't heard of, or just to clarify, something that you may know a little bit about but want to know more detail. So,
absolutely.
What are your experiences at the national conference?
And I've found within the industry, the type of person there is, it's, at different times you may be competing for the same jobs when a high-profile job comes up, but I've never come across anyone who's not prepared to share any information and their knowledge, which has been fantastic.
That's right. Yeah, that's good. I suppose that trust amongst the AICM members is great.
Yeah.
So to be an AICM member, you have to be you don't have to be, but you're a credit manager. So tell us a little bit about some of your roles as a credit manager.
Yeah, okay.
And sort of what that involves.
Yeah, and what that involves. For somebody that doesn't know anything about credit. So essentially, I'll talk, even though I cut my teeth in the consumer field with John Martins, as I mentioned before, as a credit manager, I've essentially worked in the commercial sphere. So essentially, the first thing, I guess, is you're looking at setting up an account for someone who's applied for an account. So there's the account assessment aspect. So you want to make sure who it is you're dealing with. and that what sort of record they've got in regard to payments. So credit checking, whether that be through a credit reporting agency or checking out the credit references they supply. But you just want to make sure they tick all the boxes.
Yes, of course.
And if necessarily...
And it's like an IT detail that's, that bit of intuition from being...
Yeah,
looking at that.
Yeah, that's right. There's a bit of that. You get a gut feel of just in the way some of the applications are filled out, and it's the information they may not be telling you.
Yes.
You can generally get a feel for that,
Okay.
and glean that from the information you get back from the credit reporting agencies.
Or you can give one of those references that through the industry a call and ask some further questions that might not reflect on that.
That's correct, as long as you make sure they've signed off on your application and signed off the privacy provisions of the application. Yeah, so it's not always the references that they give. You might want to check out people that that they might be dealing with, or other references that come up, or inquiries that come up on the credit report.
Okay.
To find out how they really pay.
Yes, that's right. Okay. And I suppose credit in a business function, especially a large business that you're talking about, it's very important. It's a very important position.
Absolutely, yeah, and to a degree it was, some of the large organisations I worked for, like it was a numbers game to ensure that, all the applications were coming in were assessed properly and promptly, and any ones that had queries or more information was required to put to one side, and you'd have one of your team dig a bit deeper into that to prioritise, yeah. Okay. And after an account was approved, you'd then allocate that to one of your team in the collections point of view.
Well, tell us so what's one of the most memorable or funny, or some example of something that happened while assessing credit, or one of the debtors, or something. I don't know. What's one of those moments that sort of stand out in time around your experience that you'd like to share with us today, I suppose?
Thanks, Wade.
I'm sure there's one over your career.
Every day was different, and knowing that it would, there'd be different challenges each day. It was enjoyable to get in the office and see what the day brought. But anything that comes to mind? No, it probably to a degree. Whilst there was lots of different things that you're always confronted with, different excuses for not paying and for not responding, and whatever the case may be. But I think it was the people you worked with was memorable thing. There's certainly some characters who, it's like most things, it's not a there's some rules, and like from collections, certainly there is some guidelines that need to be adhered to, but there's different ways of skinning a cat, and the way some people went about, completing their workload.
Okay. And also, probably another question to follow on from that would be that what are some of the technologies that's changed over that time that have made an impact to a role as a credit manager before and after? I was interested to hear those type of stories as well. How sometimes they impact on jobs and people.
Yeah, or when I started as a credit officer in the 70s, there was no facsimiles, certainly no internet or computers.
Do we need to get that dial-in sound now, just so we know what you're talking about?
In many cases, even the adding machines.
An adding machine?
An adding machine.
Not a calculator?
Yeah.
This is pre-dating?
It's like a calculator. Most desks had a adding machine in it with a tape. So when you're adding up a set of numbers, you'd key in those numbers and you'd rip off the tape and these days you do that on a spreadsheet, I guess.
That's right. I did actually go into a business here recently this year that still had the adding machine on 5 of their desks.
Yeah.
I nearly fell over.
I can remember the telex machine, which probably predated the fax machine. So I remember we used to communicate with our Melbourne head office via telex.
Telex, okay.
So these days you got an
email or an SMS or something.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, and that's right. Communications.
Yeah. But I suppose just digging deeper into that, did you see that technology, increase productivity and increase your capability to recover debt or assess debt?
Well, it has, because as initially we spoke about credit applications. All those credit applications were all in paper form, and they still are in a lot of cases, but they had to be filed away. So you'd have
storage issues.
Clerk. So you had storage issues. You'd have someone fully engaged in filing. I remember when I was at John Martin's, the dockets back in those days, when a purchase was made against an account, they were generally in, I think, duplicate form, one for office purposes and one that then was given to the customer at the time of purchase. Well, they had to be, when they came up to the office, they had to be sorted. So we actually had, and predominantly they were young females doing that job, and they were known as either a rough sort or fine sort, depending on whether they were filing them strict alphabetical or just filing them in rough
alphabetical.
Under alpha
so there was
order.
I suppose
and they would have a team back in the day. It was a huge area where they had the ledgers set up.
Yeah, okay. I could just imagine it. Filing, just cabinets everywhere?
Yes, filing cabinets with cards, probably the size of an A4.
The A4 size, okay.
Which at the end of each month, a tray of these cards with the dockets in front of them would disappear into the billing room, and they would be billed, and statements produced and sent out. Yeah.
So there would have been a bit of a delay in that process, or all hands on deck to get it done.
Yeah. As an example, they then had to be, after the billing, they had to be manually checked that they balance correctly. Then the statements that the billing machine produced with the dockets then went off to the mail sorter, where...
So I'm just imagining time here. Time.
Yeah. And that was a job in itself. Actually, I would just even talk about that. I remember that all come to a screaming halt one day because the young lady who was operating the machine got her hand caught, and she was in a fair bit of pain. Fortunately, she was all okay, but manual labour. Now you just log onto the computer and it files and sorts. Yeah, well, you press a button and
prints out what you want.
It prints them all out. Yeah.
Okay. So
certainly things have come a long way.
That's right. And what other industries?
So what that means is that staffing levels are a lot less.
Yeah.
In that you don't need the filing clerk, because you can now scan all your documents in and have them either sitting up in the cloud somewhere.
on the server, of course. Okay, and so I was just going to ask you, what other industries did you look after as well, or work in, or be involved in? Energy sector at one stage?
Well,
is that right?
I did have a time in the energy sector, but after I left John Martin's, and one of the reasons I left there, and that was in the early 80s, was because that was the first stages of computerisation.
Okay.
So what was happening through natural attrition, when people were leaving, they weren't being replaced. And so I could see that the opportunities to advance at Johnny's was diminishing. So I looked further afield. I was actually born in Melbourne. The family moved over to Adelaide when I think I was in about year 3, 7 or 8 years old, and but still had a lot of relatives back in Melbourne, and I always had this, I don't know if it was a goal or this vision that one day I wouldn't mind moving back to Melbourne and working in
and living
Melbourne.
there, okay,
Yeah, and there wasn't many jobs around in Adelaide, even outside of what John Martin's had to offer. One time I was in Melbourne, holidays, early 80s, and thought I'd line up a few interviews, and I got offered, I think, 2 jobs out of 3 that were offered to me. One of those was with Yellow Pages, and as a credit officer, I took on that role. Finished up being transferred back to Adelaide as credit manager for Yellow Pages.
Okay, so it brought you back.
Yeah, so it did. Yeah.
Yellow Pages, so that's another technology change
that's
around
right.
that while we're talking on it.
Yeah, so that was.
I mean, they were delivered the other
The old
day.
phone book
That's
was,
right.
so thick, and you couldn't lift it just about. And
now you need a few of them to
all,
stack the monitor on top of it, so you can see.
That's right. Well, even if I can't say I've seen one recently, because
I think they recently got delivered, but I don't know how you can opt out of them.
Yeah. So
But it's online now, obviously.
Yeah. So I was with them for 9 years, and in fact, the last couple of years I had with them was up in Queensland as their Queensland credit manager.
Okay.
But we decided to move. The kids were, ready to. Well, my daughter had already started school, but it was getting to that point where our youngest at the time was due to start school, so we moved back to Adelaide.
To set up, yeah.
And then worked for Sapco for a little while. That was interesting times. They went into receivership.
Okay.
Sapco, which was the old SA brush company.
Okay.
They've still got products on the market that they got once they went into receivership. The business got cut up in different segments and sold off.
And what would it be branded today?
It's still, I'm not sure who'd own the business now, but you still can buy Sapco products like brushes and the like.
You're talking paintbrushes?
Yeah,
or brushes
toilet brushes.
Okay, that's
more or less laundry type brushes, I guess.
Okay.
Is where the market they're in these days. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And from there, as I said, they went into receivership. I think I was the last employee to actually leave. I actually worked probably for about 6 months with the receivers.
Okay.
Collecting the book, as they said, and out of their offices, which was, gave me a good introduction as to life in a receivership office. And from there I had 9 years with George Chapman, who were part of the small goods company.
Okay.
They're no longer about. They were based in Nairn, in the Adelaide Hills. So I'd travel up each day.
Not too far, but it was still out of the city, I suppose.
It was 30 odd Ks, but was always going against the traffic. So, the trip, good run, I could do it in 25 minutes. So, yeah, it wasn't too bad. And similar on the way home, you'd see...
And a bit of different scenery, I suppose, in the city. So that would have been enjoyable as well. Yeah. And just before we go on to any other businesses in the credit side, I also know that you're quite an avid cricket fan and also umpire.
Scorer.
Sorry.
Yeah. I've always liked the sports, footy and cricket, and I guess that cricket's the one that not so much. I was an okay sort of player, but cricket had that extra bit to it, being the stats that's involved in the game. And I can remember...
So relating that to credit and...
I've always had, I guess, a bit of an attention to detail.
Yeah.
One of the things that fascinated me about cricket growing up was, scorebooks and the scoring statistics and what have you. Not that I ever really thought that I'd become a scorer, but I can remember as a kid listening to test matches on the radio from South Africa or England, which of course was in the middle of the night, Australian time, having the ABC cricket
on the radio,
book, listening to it on the radio and actually scoring the game.
Oh, so you could keep track of a visual for yourself.
So I had this visual picture of
how the game was going.
As the game was going, and
probably
the
your imagination of the game is
yeah.
better than actually watching it.
And even to this day, if I'm not at a game, I enjoy listening rather than maybe at times watching. On the telly,
because it probably takes you back to that time.
Maybe. And here we are now, all these years later, and I was fortunate enough to be appointed a Saka State scorer 6 years ago now, which means I get to essentially any games that are on Adelaide Oval.
You're there.
I'm in the scoring box.
Fantastic. And that's a great spot and a great view there, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So you get essentially the best seat in the house, and you get to cross paths with certainly at state level a lot of the players and the officials, within the high performance structure.
Fantastic.
Of the Saka, which is fantastic.
And what's your favourite game that you've been to? I suppose that's a usual question that someone asks you, but...
Well, I've been now I'm just trying to think, a Saka member prior to becoming the state scorer, 3 or 4 years prior to that, it would have been, or maybe even longer. I think it was 2005, 2006, test match here at Adelaide. I think it got known, this test, as Unbelievable Adelaide, or words.
You mean that's like the headline on?
Because the test match, it was just an incredible game in that the English batted first, and I attended all 5 days as a member, and I was just engrossed in the game. And I remember the head on the pillow going to sleep after the night 4, and for intents and purposes, the game was never going to be won. It was going to be a draw because the English had pretty much stranglehold on the game, but the Aussies had different ideas. And I remember
and they still had a chance
sleep that night. That I'm thinking, if the Aussies can get a few early wickets, they're back in the game. The English batted first and declared tea time day 2 at 550. The Aussies went into bat, and then they batted until late on day 4, I think, and actually declared about 50 or so runs behind. So with a day and a bit to go, it was unlikely that was going to be a result. So the Poms went back into bat, and rather than, they just kind of shut up shop. They weren't intent on scoring, and they might have lost a couple of wickets that night. And so I think they might have been 2 for 60 or 70 overnight. So in effect, 2 for 100. Well, the Aussies then dismissed them early day 5. I think pretty much right on lunch. If it wasn't on lunch, it was just after. And they weren't scoring runs, and the Aussies at the time still had the likes of Shane Warne and Glenn McGrath playing, and they just ran through them and
caught up.
And essentially took the final 8 wickets for maybe another 100 runs, if that, on that final day. Probably was a little less than 100 on that final day. And what that then left was the Aussies to get chasing a score of about 180, 30 odd overs I think were left. And they got them
quite easily,
with about 4 wickets down. And it was incredible. Just
to go from that change to
the game just changed, and it was just a fantastic result.
And I'm sure the atmosphere was just.
And I was lucky that day in that we were able to get seats right in front of the Players' Pavilion.
Oh yeah.
And to hear the Aussies sing under the Southern Sky or whatever their song is after the game, that they only ever sang when they won a Test match. Was fantastic, and even prior to that, virtually every player from the change room ran onto the oval after the game and were just ecstatic with the win.
Great.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, it was amazing, Adelaide. What that game was.
That's what they ended up calling it. So if you look that up, that's what it would be.
Yeah.
Excellent. Oh, that's very memorable.
Yep.
All right. So I suppose we'll appreciate you coming along and having a chat to us today and filling us in a bit about AICM, a bit about your roles in credit management, your love for the game of cricket and scoring. Is there anything else that you wanted to sort of add today that you'd like to sort of recap or finish on? Around the credit and collection space, where you see it going in the future, maybe?
Yeah, credit and collections, as we spoke about with the technology, things have absolutely changed. But I think what's become of that, whereas in the past, I think you could specialise in different aspects of the credit. You didn't necessarily specialise in different aspects.
As you do today.
Yeah.
Whereas you can be an analyst, you can be on the front line, phone. So you're sort of.
And it was something. Like I fell into the industry. I left school not really knowing what I was wanting to do, and got a position with John Martin's. Just as a junior clerk to start off with.
So they give you a taste of the finance.
Yeah, and then which just in the office, and then that took me into credit, and then all of a sudden, this I'd never even thought about, credit management and a career in credit management, and it's it just went from there.
Okay, excellent. Very good.
Yeah, and I think that's probably not unlike a lot of people within the industry who fall into it.
They do,
It's not something like the school leavers say, I want to become a credit manager.
No.
Yeah. But those skills that I've learnt have been transferable into my role today with Mercantile CPA.
Yeah, excellent. Very good. All right, well, appreciate you coming along. Thanks.
No worries. Thank you.